So, as Brian said, my name is John Folberth. I got a bio up here, some certs. If you haven't seen me speak before, all right, I get the signal. It can be a little louder. Feel free to interject. Feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to ask questions. I mean, I always tell folks when I do these, the difference between me and YouTube is you can ask questions, you can throw stuff at me. You won't hurt my feelings. So, that being said, this topic is Azure Deployment Environments. And with that being said, the first question I have is, let's see, show of hands, has anyone heard of Azure Deployment Environments? Okay. How many people have used Azure Deployment Environments? Okay, not surprising. It's okay. For those on the recording later, no one raised their hands. So this is a relatively new product within Azure's product ecosystem. It was announced, I want to say, at March last year. But what else got launched around March? Copilot and Microsoft Fabric. So it kind of got buried a little bit. But what Azure Deployment Environments is first, it is an actual product, like I mentioned. And the goal of it is there's a couple different approaches, and I'll focus here on the far right. In fact, we'll walk through the far right ones. But essentially, the core of it is, I got one to make it a little bigger, or full screen it. We can do that, see how that goes. All right, so the goal of it is usually in a scenario. I'll do another show of hands. How many folks today can develop their own infrastructure as code or deploy things directly into the portal, even in a dev environment? Okay, there's some. How many people can't? Okay, we're about split, I'd say. So with that being said, today, if you need to make changes, or if I need to change or make something in dev, I have to go talk potentially to an ops team to go ahead and create that. Well, Azure Deployment Environments tries to leverage, there's three things here. The easiest one is the one in the middle, Sandbox environment. So what it can do is it can go ahead and just a portal experience. I go ahead and I'll walk through it here. You click the button, it'll create a resource group, provision the user, and anything else with the scope to access over the resource group. So it's a sandbox, on demand. You can go ahead and put cost measures in place, can automatically delete. Second scenario is, let's say we're doing a shared dev environment where we've got front-end developers who are using a shared database backend. Well, I want to make my changes, and I want to work with them besides on my local machine. I want to make them out in Azure. Well, I can go ahead, fill out a quick form, click a button, and again, it'll deploy that infrastructure for me, scoped for my access directly into Azure. Now, I accomplish this via infrastructure as code templates, which I'll talk about a little bit of that as well. And the third one is, if we think about this in theory, we've got our infrastructure as code, an automated process to provision it. Can I bake that in a CI/CD pipeline? So then I can go ahead and create my infrastructure on demand at CI potentially, run some unit tests against that infrastructure. Maybe I go ahead and deploy an application to it as well, and then spin it back down. So the last one here we'll talk about is that scenario. So a lot of things to cover, but feel free, please stop me, ask questions. And with that being said, let me go ahead here and jump out to the first one. So what I'm doing here is I have a developer account. This developer account, there's one resource group. It's out there. I'll explain why in a minute, but it has no access in the subscription outside this. So it doesn't have reader access, nothing. And to confirm that, if you want, I'll go here to my subscription. And let's go into here, and let me go into IAM. And we'll go ahead and check my access. Oh, wait, I hit the wrong button. View my access. So you can see I got no permissions here, no role assignments. So what you can do is, and this is the dev portal. Has anyone heard of dev boxes? I'll raise that one. Okay. Dev portal, Azure Deployment Environments and DevBox, they kind of share the same dev portal, as well as some of the structure on the back end. I'll talk through some of that. But here, I'll go in, I'll create a new environment. We'll go ahead and say this one. This is the West Azure User Group, West Michigan. All right, and then the environment type, I'll talk about some of this later. But I'm going to do a sandbox, and hopefully this one's going to work. And then if I want to, I can automatically schedule deletion for later. But if I go ahead and create this, what it is doing behind the scenes, it is doing a deployment to my Azure subscription. And it knows who I am by logged in. And there's some stuff on the back end I'll walk through as well. And it's going to go ahead and provision that resource group for me as the user who had no access in the Azure portal. This shouldn't take too long. It's just a resource group. In fact, I bet you if I go back into here and refresh, it's still creating. While it's doing that, because I know this will be a question, so let me go ahead here and pull up the Dev Center. So if you've done Dev Boxes, then you're familiar with Dev Centers. I'm in the wrong account because, again, this one doesn't have access. So if I go to my Dev Center here, inside my Dev Center, there is a project, which I have here. Inside the project here, I can have an identity. So it's going to, or sorry, not here. It's going to be in the environment types. Sorry. So if I go into this, and I go ahead here and I hit edit this, in this environment type, I can say this is the subscription this project's associated with, and also we are going to use the user assigned identity to do the deployments. So when I click that button behind the scenes, it says, oh, you're going to go ahead and create a deployment with this user assigned identity. Now the user I have, the developer one, that has access to the Dev Center. I skipped over that part. But you can see here, I can give it different access for resources that are created. In this case, I'm saying give it contributor and user access admin. So that way I can contribute resources and I can do the security and provision other ones. Yes? Is there a reason why you use a user-assigned identity instead of a system? Honestly, because I think when I did this the first time, that feature wasn't available. Oh, okay. So yes, you can use that now. As well as you can put tags on it, which is kind of nice because then I can also quickly say, oh yeah, this is for this user's project. Well, again, you already have a project, but you can do tags as well. So now, if I come back here and let's refresh this. There we go. So there's my resource group. Maybe the access hasn't provisioned yet. Let me refresh this. All right, so let me click it through here. I can click here. And there we go. And now if I go to IAM and we go to role assignments, we can see that my developer one has contributor access, as well as, if I go down here, user access administrator, the two roles that I said it had. It had nothing to access in the portal, but now it has access to this resource group in an automated fashion. So this is a really cool thing to be like, if I'm on the operations side of things and I get told that, oh yeah, I send you requests and it takes a week or two to get to them. Well, now it's, hey, you can go in and you can create your own test sandbox resource group here, and you can do that and we can monitor on the back end, which, by the way, if I go back to my administrator here, and if I go back to these projects, I can see, I just cleaned these out a little bit, but the environments that have been spun up. In fact, there's the one I just did right here. In fact, there's advisor recommendations. I can click view cost. Just really a click to cost analysis. It's scoped at the resource group. So nothing too fancy there, but it's at least an integrated portal experience. So any questions on the Sandbox piece of it? The next demo, there's some time. We can walk around. We can see some of the other components of it, because I'm sure people are like, well, how do you do the templates? There are more drop-downs, environment types. Yes?
Can the Sandbox be automatically cleaned up at the end after a specified amount of time?
Yes. So when I went ahead and created it, you notice there's a checkbox. I can go ahead and check that. That is a relatively new feature. I want to say they rolled that out in November or December. I have not done the automated piece of it, but yes, you can go ahead and clean those up. Previously, you had to do something where off the tag and then do an automation account or something to clean up that way. But now that's been baked into the experience. So earlier, I talked about, I'm going to jump out here and we'll make it big again. So this scenario, let's say we're working on a front end for an application that's backed by Cosmos and log analytics, because I don't want potentially developers to spin up 50 log analytics instances that no one knows what they were used for. Well, instead, we're going to go ahead and say, when I create this, provide me what your backend and what your log analytics workspace is, and we'll go ahead and we'll create the infrastructure for you. So for this experience, to show you what it is, and this is one where I've already created it because it will take a little bit of time, and I'll walk through the process here. I go to new environment, and we're going to call this one, in fact, let me do this. My definition here is I've got demo app, And if I go to next, it's asking me now for inputs. So think of this, if you're familiar with ARM or Bicep, this would be what are my ARM template parameters I'm going to pass into it, because now we're talking about, we've hooked this up really to a template. Before it was an empty resource group. So it was a resource group deployment, didn't really need to have a template. Here we're defining our application's infrastructure as such, there's already a template in existence. However, if you structured things differently, you would say, hey, my Cosmos database template and my log analytics templates I showed there earlier, they shouldn't be in the same application template. They're separate because they're going to be deployed separately, managed separately, and they have different life cycles. So as such, Bicep or ARM or Terraform, we can get to that too in a minute, it needs to know what exists outside. So it's going to go behind the scenes, look this stuff up, and provision the access and the settings appropriately. So for here, and because I didn't write these down ahead of time, I'm going to jump over here. This is my log analytics workspace. And I'm going to jump back here and grab the resource group. And then I'm going to say this is all in the East US. Now let me jump over here. And also, if you wanted to see, there's my lovely application. It's just a to-do list, nothing fancy. So if I go now into my Cosmos here, and I'll grab this account, and then the resource group, then we hit create. So a couple things that we'll talk about with the template and why we need some of those is this is going to use the Cosmos RBAC provisioning. So it's going to go ahead and give it the RBAC Cosmos writer role to the database. So as such, what's deploying here, again, remember the deployment's the UID. So the UID is going to need to have access to these other resources. So it's going to go ahead and then add the RBAC role to Cosmos and update the app settings to have the correct endpoint for the Cosmos database that gets spun up. Additionally, it's going to go out to the log analytics workspace and then add that into a diagnostic setting off the app insights. So what this, yeah. Yes, yep, it's already there. So this is the scenario where we're working on a shared database, you know, and I don't want to spin up my own instance to test something out. Maybe think about maybe even a test environment where I have good test data. Yep. So jumping over here. Now this one, it might get a little bit off track here, and that's okay. I'm trying not to focus on the concept here, but within this, let me do a show of hands. I'm going to get to my Bicep file. Does anyone know about Bicep registries? Okay, got a couple hands, not a lot. Does everyone know about Terraform registries, private registries? Okay, some more. Bicep registries and Terraform registries, same concept. For the purpose of this, I'm not going to focus on, but realize that in this model, I may want to have my developers be able to author the main template, but they have to use my templates that I've provisioned for them. So you can do that through a registry. So in this case, maybe it's the app service, I've got a shared template that I post in a central location, and then the developers can build off of that and pull it down and use it. So what's going on here to walk you through, this is the template that's being deployed. If you notice, some of the stuff was things that I had asked on the parameters there. There's my location, there's my base name. Some of these weren't there, which is fine because I don't necessarily want you to pick the app service plan SKU. But I do need to know the log analytics piece and the Cosmos piece. So I'm surfacing that. I'll show that in a minute. But here, this is now importing. Let me try blowing this up a little bit. No, that's too much. So high level, because again, this isn't really about what the ISA is doing. I'm just stepping you through it. There's the log analytics to import it, the Cosmos database to import. Because RBAC in Cosmos only supports a user-assigned identity, it's going to create a user-assigned identity here. The app service plan, the app service in the app service plan. Here's where I pull in the app insights outputs to put that in there. And then there's my Cosmos account that I had to go ahead and import in. And this is all just passing in the app settings, really. There's the app insights. I referenced the output beforehand. Sorry about that. Here's the Cosmos RBAC provisioning module. But all this is doing is that Dev Center has now kicked off this process. Now, the next question would be, up here, you gave me 20 parameters or however many, but you only had to fill out 4 or 5. Why is that? So the way this works, if I'm going to jump back, is if I go here to my Dev Center. Am I in the right account? Yes, I am. Inside a Dev Center, you have what's known as a catalog. All right, and the catalog is a repository. And in that repository is your list of templates I'm exposing to my dev portal. So this is how, hey, I've got my IAC templates. How do I get them loaded in that dev portal? It's through here. It is through a catalog. And you can see it. Everything I do on this, by the way, is out in GitHub. I'll leave the link if you want it. But there's my GitHub, and it goes through that. And what it does, in fact, what I'm going to do is pull up my GitHub here, and what that template looks like is inside here. There is, I can't remember where I put this, if it's in infrastructure or YAML. Bear with me 1 second. There's this manifest YAML file. This is how you map what's shown in the dev portal to your parameters template. So you see here, these IDs match to what's in my IAC template. And I have a name, I have a description. This would match the hover boxes. So that's how those two connect. And it is a how do I want to say this? A recursive wildcard search, or recursive search for the manifest file. So if I wanted to, I could have one central repo with everything in it, and it will pull everything available that way. In fact, if I go back here, I've got a repository, or actually the product group offers a repository with the templates in it to get started, which is right here. So here, if you wanted to get started, there's directions on how to do this, but you can see in this case, it's got a function app, the Sandbox, the web app, all in here. And each one of these, if I drill into them, have a separate manifest file. So then you could potentially have one repository with everything in it. I think that's just 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and it's the organization's call on how to structure those. So let's jump back over here, and it looks like I spoke long enough here that it provisioned it for us. So inside here, if I go to this one, you can see there's my application insights, there's my app service, there's my app service plan, and there's my user assigned identity, all contained in this resource group that was created through the portal-like experience. To confirm too, if I go to my app insights, you can see here, it's hooked up to my Log Analytics workspace that's shared. I go back here and check out my app service. And let's go ahead and check out my app service settings. And let's just go ahead. I got nothing secretive there. You can see there's my Cosmos endpoint that got put into there. So you can see how this kind of pulls together. So now if I'm on a larger project with multiple devs, I can have my own dedicated development on the front end in Azure calling upon a shared backend. Any questions on that? I know this is a fire hose, and I realize that. So please ask questions if you have any.
Can you target the subscription? For example, if you have like a VS Enterprise subscription and developers have their own Azure credits that they could use, could I then have these templates set up by the organization, but apply it to my Azure subscription so that I'm not burning organization money?
It's a good question. I'm going to talk through that. The question is how to go ahead and be able to pick when I do that catalog screen or the box screen there, so I can choose what subscription it goes to. The things there when talking through that is that's being deployed by a UID or the system assigned identity. If you want to do that, that needs to have access to that subscription it's deploying into first. So if I'm an individual developer on my own Visual Studio Enterprise, odds are it's not going to be there. Second thing when talking through that is when I go into the Dev Center and I pick at the project level, this is the wrong one, I go into here. I pick at the project level and the environment types what subscription it's targeted to. So you see right here, you pick the deployment subscription. So you can't multifaceted it because also this is a resource group-based deployment. So it's not at the subscription level. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you have existing IAC templates, honestly, it burned me and I had to work through it because everything I did was a subscription. I'm like, oh, I got to rewrite some of my deployment stuff to handle resource group. It makes some sense. It depends upon what your ecosystem is where you work. If it's going to be more on the secure side, locking things down to the resource group, I can't argue this is a more secure approach. It's just pros and cons with the subscription versus resource group based deployment. Okay, so talked through that. So the last one, if I come back here, is I forgot to move that one, the CI/CD scenario. So one of these things, if we look at it, those that are familiar with Azure, one of the things you know is like you can pretty much automate anything that goes on that I click through in the Azure portal. So how can I automate this? And then if I can automate this, how can I incorporate this into my automated potential CI or CD process? We'll walk through that. So the scenario I have here is that pull request, and I have one, I'll spin it up. It'll create the ADE, I'm using that for the abbreviation, and then it will, I'm missing a spot here, deploy an application to that ADE, then run an Azure load test against that ADE, and then destroy it. Because if you saw a session I gave a couple months ago on Azure load testing, you know that Azure load testing can hook to log analytics for long-term log retention, as well as be able to quickly scale and potentially identify throttling issues within your application. So for this to work, what I'm going to pull up here is I've gotten better at these. If you've seen some of my talks before, I do a lot of templating. I try to put the expanded one in to make it a little bit easier to follow along. Let me do this. I want to break you out of this window. If you didn't know too, that was one of the newer updates to VS Code, which is pretty slick if I can get it to pull over. All right. So inside here, this is just the trigger, my pool. I've got a multi-stage YAML pipeline. What I'm going to do is do the build stage. So a lot of times when we do this is I'm going to publish the infrastructure, which in this case, the IAC that's used in that catalog is going to match the IAC I'm going to use in my dev test prod environment. So it's different parameters. So as such, I usually publish my infrastructure pieces of that as part of the pipeline. So if I ever want to roll back, it's a snapshot. I can rerun it. It's all an artifact of the pipeline as opposed to the repository at that given time. So if I go back, it's still the same. I'm going to run a publish test because I have a test folder with my JMeter tests in it. And then I'm going to run a what if. I just do that just because it doesn't hurt. So it gives me some potential changes if I want to make or see what's going to happen. I do a what if across all my environments. I also recommend if you're on the Terraform side, similar is doing a Terraform plan across dev, test, and prod at the same time to make sure you're not going to mess up prod when you get to prod. Then here, I'm building my application just using the .NET task here. And then here's the build, the .NET Core CLI test, do the build and the publish. And then I publish the whole pipeline artifact. And now the first step, so I do that build, that goes ahead and publishes the artifact. Now this one is going to be the Azure Deployment Environment. So I think of this in my head as in I built it, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and do the CI, the integration testing piece of this. So here's the job to create the ADE. So one thing I'll call out here is right here is Azure Dev Center has its own CLI, okay? So that's effectively what I'm going to do here. So I'm just going to call the Azure Dev Center CLI to go ahead and kick off that catalog, that deployment environment creation automatically. So how that works is you do have to pass in a bunch of parameters like the Dev Center name, the project, the environment definition name. But the one thing I want to call out, if I jump back over to here, is actually, I have it here. This is better. It is a JSON file. Where did I put it? It's infrastructure. Okay. Here we go. So it's just a JSON file of what those parameters are. So I have that as my parameters.json file. I'm going to pass that in via the CLI command, and it's going to go ahead and say, okay, this is very similar to like an ARM deployment or a bicep one where I have a separate parameters file. That's all I'm doing here. I'm just calling it Dev Center CLI command. So now we'll go ahead and that'll deploy it. Then I'm going to go ahead and do my web app deployment. So this will deploy my web application. And I've already have the package as a zip. I'll pull up the pipeline so you can see it. And then I'm going to run a load test, which is right here. And the last time I'm going to delete it. And that's all at CI to kind of see this in process. And it's funny, I was kind of getting ready for this, and my pipeline for CI, I tried to upgrade this to .NET 6 because it was an old project, and it failed. So I have to troubleshoot that, but it should still show you the workflow. So here's my build. If I go to my artifacts here, you can see here's the zip file of the application. Here's my the JMeter stuff for Azure load testing, and then here's my infrastructure templates that I used. And what's going to happen here is, in this case, you can see this does the deployment of the ADE. So if I go here, you can go through this, and these are the parameters that we passed in through that parameters file. And then you can see it succeeded. Then deploy an application to it, and then run the load test, which it failed on. But what I wanted to call out is, if I want to show you this, if I copy this link, because I'm in 2 subscriptions, apologies for multi-factor. I thought I had this all cleared. I can come out here and see the results of that load test that got ran for the failure. So that's there. Additionally, too, what if we're not just doing load testing? Let's just talk about general application usage potentially. Well, if you remember, my app insights that I stood up is connected to that shared log analytics workspace. So I can go into log analytics and see the application errors. So I don't need to keep this ADE around forever to try to troubleshoot. So that's kind of the thought here too, is that you can go ahead and quickly destroy the environment if you want as well. But then you can kind of see I've now shifted all that pieces to CI. When I go to submit a pull request, it's deploying the application in a contained environment. It's running a unit test. It's running mine's running a load test, but maybe you're running a unit test. You can get all that feedback before I even commit or go ahead and merge that change into my main or master or deployment branch. I've got all that there. So that's kind of where the power comes with some of this stuff. So for Q&A, a couple things. I took this slide out because there's some things to understand is today, this only is GA in ARM templates. Another reason why you may not have heard this. Terraform is in private preview. If you want access to it, let me know. I can try to work with the product group on that and see what we can do. But Terraform is coming. Bicep is also coming. So Bicep's not even GA yet. So do Bicep, I showed it all, but I did a Bicep build to get the ARM template and put the ARM template in there. But yes, it's coming. I think there's going to be more around that area. I think once it gets Terraform support, you might be hearing more about it, because I think there's a recognition that that's a big gap. Because you put this in front of a customer 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh, you only support ARM? How about Terraform followed by, how about Bicep? So that's all coming. Any other questions specific on that CI/CD piece of it? Anything you want me to pull up, look at? Yep.
Was the Dev Center resource going to be deployable via Bicep or Terraform as well, or just the ADE and those things?
Great question. So Dev Center itself is an Azure resource. It should, I haven't done it yet, but I would imagine, I don't know if there's a Terraform provider out there for Dev Center yet. That's the holdup, I would say. I know ARM and Bicep there is, because, is anyone familiar with the Azure Developer CLI? Okay. And real fast too, because I didn't say what the question was. The question was, is Dev Center going to be deployable via Terraform and Bicep? So the Azure Developer CLI, if you aren't familiar with it, it's a CLI that Microsoft has developed, or CLI tooling, that says you can call a command, and the thought is that it will go ahead and spin up the application, the infrastructure, the pipelines, all that for you, kind of like a sample project. There is an Azure Developer CLI project for ADE. So you can grab a template from there now, is where I'm going with this, for ARM that's out there, ARM and I think Bicep. Pretty sure Bicep's out there, but that's coming. The other thing, and this is a newer product I'd pay attention to, is something called Azure Verified Modules, where the thought is that we're going to be pushing out modules of infrastructure of code for either ARM or Bicep or Terraform as to kind of what adheres to practices overall, and it's a real product. So what that means is it's going to be supported by Microsoft. There's SLAs behind it, but it's kind of gets around the, how do I stand up a storage account? Because I see 20 Microsoft demos that do it 20 different ways. Well, instead, nope, here's the gold-plated one for you to go off and run with. So hopefully that answered it. 5 more than you asked for.
It is, but no, it's perfect.
Okay. Any other questions?
As an administrator, can you impose cost restrictions so that you don't have developers going and creating massively expensive resources?
So one thing I did not say on that is, because this is happening at the subscription, it's going to adhere to all policies you set forward. So it's not like you're going to circumnavigate policies. So you could set something like that, the policy piece of it, in terms of, it's going to come down to, you could do policy, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, you could do a deploy if not exist and listen to the tag of the project, and you could put something in place then with a budget on it. But I don't know of anything that's, hey, I don't want anything to go above X. I think that would be a product of your infrastructure as code templates. Yes?
Yeah, mine's kind of piggybacking off that. I just was wondering, if you did a lot of pull requests, what the cost you have to worry about.
Oh, I didn't even say this. So the question is about cost on pull request. This service in Azure is completely free. I should have said that. It's completely free because it's consumption based. So in that scenario with the cost on pull request, you pay for the compute of the resources you stand up. So again, if I do a quick pull request and delete it, probably not going to be too much. So that's something I should have mentioned earlier. So thank you.
John, I'm kind of wondering, like, where does the product team see this as like the best fit for like development team size? Like, is it good for like 1 or 2 developers? Is it better when there's 5+ developers? Like, is it full enterprise?
I can't speak for them. I don't know for sure. I can tell you what my feel for it is, and I'd say my feel is that it's really for ones that's going to be a high controlled environment, where you're going to have potentially regulation and separation of duties, and those typically are going to be larger than a 5-person development, like a 5-person company, right? Those are going to be larger. But that being said, I will say that the product team did document a couple different test scenarios. So another one, or use scenarios. So another one is, what if I'm doing training for someone? If I do training for someone, I can onboard them to my Azure portal. They click a button, they get all the infrastructure rather than spending the first 2 hours of the training class trying to troubleshoot. So that is one use case they've identified. The Sandbox one I showed is another one. And the other one I'll tell you is the catalog one. So I don't have a great answer for you on that one. It's each their own. And for the record too, if you've seen or interacted with me before, you know I'm a big proponent that developers should own the infrastructure as code. So to me, this is kind of like a compromise between, okay, well, I can still write some of the infrastructure as code, but you guys own the templated standard. Anything else? All right, well, I'll be around if you have any questions or any follow-up. At this point, I'm handing it off to Brian for the question of the month.